Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that gives you the intellectual blueprint for complex works, extracting the essential knowledge, the surprising connections, and the emotional core without the 300 pages of assigned reading.
And today we are immersing ourselves in a novel that is, it's just so many things at once.
It really is. It's a thriller, it's a comedy of manners, and it's a really profound philosophical inquiry. We're talking about Peter Carey's 2003 masterpiece, My Life is a Fake.
It is a phenomenal piece of literature. It's one of those books that starts with a seemingly simple premise, a literary hoax, but it just escalates. It spirals into genuine crime, tragedy, and a deep contemplation of what it even means to be real versus invented.
Right.
It's a beautifully written exploration of lying, of fakery, insincerity, and the often uncomfortable cultural neuroses that underpin artistic creation.
And the critics, well, they knew they had something major on their hands right away. I mean, how often do you read a review that calls a novel the impossible offspring of a fictional menage a trois?
That's quite a description.
It is, isn't it? The Times in London used that exact phrase.
Yeah.
And they cited these incredible influences, Nabokov's Pale Fire, for its complex structure and unreliable narrative.
You can definitely see that.
And then the moral crisis and expatriate setting of Conrad's Lord Jim, and finally the sort of dark humor and political intrigue of Graham Greene's Our Man in Havana.
That literary pedigree, it really speaks volumes about the density of the material we have to unpack today. It's a structure built on layers and layers of deceit.
From top to bottom.
Yeah, from the fictional poet at the center of it all, right down to the deepest, darkest secrets of our narrator's own family.
Before we really dive in, let's just quickly situate the author for everyone. We're talking about Peter Carey. He was born in Australia in 1943, lives in New York now, and he's a rare two-time winner of the Booker Prize.
That's right, for Oscar and Lucinda and True History of the Kelly Gang. So, this is a writer who is absolutely operating at the peak of his craft.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to follow the source material, which is the novel's really intense narrative. Our guide through this is the narrator, Sarah Wode-Douglass.
We get to know her as Mix.
Exactly, Mix. She's a high-powered editor who travels to Malaysia and, well, she very quickly finds herself chasing this decades-old Australian literary hoax and the horrific, monstrous consequences it unleashed.
So we're essentially tracing her quest. We're following Mix to discover what happens when an invented literary personality literally becomes flesh and blood.
And starts demanding justice.
We really have to begin with Mix herself. Sarah Wode-Douglass is such a fascinating lens through which to view this entire world.
Her background is so key to understanding her.
It's everything. She comes from this deeply fractured background. She's the daughter of an Australian mother who's described as beautiful but severely emotionally repressed, and a rather posh English father, Lord William Wode-Douglass.
Whom everyone called Boofy.
Right, Boofy. And as an adult, Mix is. She's hyper-controlled. She has channeled all her energy, all her passion into a single profession.
She's the editor of the Modern Review. And she defines herself completely by that role, saying with this sort of sharp, self-deprecating wit, I am an editor. It's all I do. I read. I have no other life.
It's so telling, that line. But what makes her character so rich, so complex, is the sheer weight of cultural baggage she carries around with her. And that stems almost entirely from her dreadful snob of a mother.
But that cultural baggage is really the invisible engine driving Mix, isn't it?
It is, and the novel explains it perfectly. Her mother was completely obsessed with social standing and specifically with European approval. She was terrified of being out of date.
Constantly asking what was happening in London or Paris or New York.
Yes, and at the same time, she deeply, viscerally loathed anything Australian, just hated it.
And this is where we need to bring in that key concept the novel names directly. The tyranny of distance. This was this profound psychological anxiety felt by many Australians, especially in the mid-20th century. This feeling that their culture was hopelessly provincial, remote, always lagging behind the grand, validated culture of Europe.
A constant yearning for approval from abroad.
Exactly. And Mix is a product of that anxiety. She carries this inherited loathing of her own Australian roots, and she strives to maintain this polished, edited European persona.
And that very insecurity is what makes her so vulnerable when the catalyst for the entire journey, the poet John Slater, just strides back into her life.
Slater. He is the perfect iconoclast to just blow up Mix's perfectly edited existence. He's described as pure, overwhelming charisma mixed with a very healthy dose of narcissism.
He's the poet who continues to write poetry, while Mix is the editor who makes the literary world turn. They run in the same circles, they sit at the same literary tables in London, but their relationship is just. It's incredibly volatile.
He's such a chaotic force of nature. I mean, the sources paint him doing these almost unbelievable attention-seeking things.
Like bringing Unity Mitford to dinner.
With ferret in tow, apparently.
Or riding a horse directly into someone's kitchen. He's just that kind of figure. So he wins this British Council ticket to Kuala Lumpur, or KL, supposedly to research some obscure poet named Dusong.
A total pretense.
Completely. And he somehow convinces Mix to join him, bankrolling her trip through an article she's supposed to be writing for the magazine Nova.
And their dynamic is just fascinating because Mix is simultaneously drawn to him and, at the same time, absolutely repulsed by him.
And she knows it, too. She recognizes that this repulsion is inextricably linked to her memories of her poor, unhappy mother.
Right. Deep down, Mix believes that Slater was somehow involved in her mother's unhappiness. But she doesn't know the exact mechanism yet. She just has this gut feeling.
So they land in KL, a destination rooted in this literary lie, and almost immediately, Slater pulls his most characteristic move.
He disappears.
Just gone. Mix returns to the hotel to find, and I quote, he and his luggage had departed the hotel, no message, just gone.
And she's left feeling utterly violated. Emotionally, physically, the book uses the words passionately seduced, fucked, and abandoned. She's too furious, too agitated to even think about her work.
Which forces her out of her editorial mind, out of her comfort zone, and into the teeming, overwhelming city.
And KL provides such a stunning contrast to Mix's controlled interior life. She notes the Moorish railway station, the stinking wet markets. The city is just a total sensory assault.
It's a terrible mixture of two-stroke exhaust, spice, smoke, sewer gas.
But she finds these little moments of control, like in the early mornings when the Sikh bank guards are eating their sweet barfi. A brief moment of sweetness in all that chaos.
And it's important to note how the novel integrates the recent violent history of the place. It's not just a backdrop.
No, it's alive. Mix reminds herself that this seemingly gentle city had seen horrific ethnic violence just 3 years earlier. Blood running along the deep drains after the butchering of Chinese neighbors.
So the city itself holds this suppressed, violent truth, which perfectly mirrors the truth she's about to uncover about everyone, including herself.
And it is in this agitated, highly exposed state, wandering through a noisy street of Chinese shophouses on Jalen Campbell, that she spots him, the initial mystery.
She glances peevishly into one little store and sees the man who will change her life, Christopher Chubb.
The description is just so immediate and compelling. He's a middle-aged white man sitting amidst this tangle of bicycles wearing a dirty sarong.
And he has these angry red sores on his sturdy legs. His whole appearance is one of profound displacement, of possible poverty. His close-cropped hair and lopsided eyebrows make her think of a monk or maybe a prisoner.
But what is it that compels her to investigate him? It's not just idle curiosity.
No, it's a feeling of pity and also connection. She imagines him to be lost, and she feels this compulsion tied to her own personal guilty reasons to give him some kind of comfort.
She realizes her curiosity is bordering on obsession.
An intensity that is the dark side of her editorial precision. She recognizes she's channeling all the obsessive tendencies which have made me a good editor toward this strange, sore-legged man.
When she returns to the shop later, she encounters the second piece of the puzzle. This melancholy, cultured Australian man.
Pure bone and muscle, pushing a squeaking bicycle. He avoids talking about Slater, but he seems so deeply entrenched in this expatriate repair shop life.
And Mix, the editor of reality, she just can't reconcile it. She can't reconcile the man's evident culture with his place amidst the grease and bicycles on Jalen Campbell.
She knows there's a story there, a massive hidden truth, just waiting to be edited out into the open.
The moment Mix becomes the central figure in this decades-old drama is when Christopher Chubb, the man from Jalen Campbell, actually tracks her down at her hotel.
And he's ditched the sarong, he's made an attempt at formal respectability, he's wearing a rain-soaked, loose-fitting, double-breasted tweed suit.
Which is just the worst possible choice of outfit for the climate.
It fails spectacularly. It's made for a much heavier man and a much cooler climate, and it only emphasizes his greater poverty and disenfranchisement compared to the simple sarong.
He is literally wearing the costume of a world he no longer belongs to, the world of literary respectability.
And Chubb, whom she instantly identifies by his nasal, reedy voice as Australian, begins his confession. And this is the central pivot of the entire novel.
He claims responsibility. He says he created the phantom poet Bob McCorkle all the way back in 1946. He delivered this ragingly modern opus to the famous literary journal Personae.
And we have to look closely at who Chubb was at that time to understand the depth of his cynicism. He was a very serious provincial academic poet.
A horribly prim, self-righteous sort.
Exactly. He created McCorkle purely out of spite. It was literary vengeance dressed up as high art criticism.
He wanted to sting David Weiss, who was the editor of Personae, because he believed Weiss was publishing fake and half-past-six poetry.
Poems he thought were just chasing the latest trends in literary fashion without any real substance. He was a traditionalist disgusted by the modernists.
But the irony is just incredible.
Yeah.
In trying to prove that Weiss lacked critical discernment, Chubb himself employed tremendous critical discernment.
Oh, absolutely. He crafted the hoax with deliberate, almost surgical precision. He used all these contradictory details to ensure the editor would look foolish for falling for it.
Okay, let's unpack the components of this fake genius, because they really reveal Chubb's brilliant, cynical mind.
First, there's the biography. He makes McCorkle a common bicycle mechanic. And his intention there was to challenge the lofty liberal literary notion that great art could just spring, fully formed, from the ignorant.
A direct attack on the idea of the noble, uneducated artist.
Exactly. But then, and this is the brilliant part of the trap, the poetry itself was filled with dense classical allusions and a really complex modern structure. References a bicycle mechanic couldn't possibly possess.
So he was deliberately making the editor choose between the common man's supposed authenticity and the art's sheer impossibility.
He was forcing him into a corner. And the details they're just hilarious in their cynicism. He proudly confesses to stealing lines directly from an army manual on mosquito eradication.
Lines like, areas of stagnant water serve as breeding grounds.
And he presents them as profound modernist verse. But the deepest cut, the most personal act, was the literary parody.
He specifically targeted Ezra Pound, one of the modernists he despised the most.
Right. So Pound's famous poem, A Pact, begins with the line, "I make a pact with you, Walt Whitman." So McCorkle's poem, Colloquy with John Keats, deliberately parodies this, opening with the line, "I have been bitter with you, my brother."
He was embedding literary satire right into the work's DNA, a joke only the initiated would get.
So the immediate consequence of this brilliant, cynical prank was catastrophic.
David Weiss, the editor, killed himself.
And Chubb believes Weiss died because he valued truth above friendship. He was just destroyed by the public humiliation when the hoax was exposed. It proved his critical integrity was, in his own eyes, lacking.
But the literary trauma didn't end there, did it? Slater later steps in and reveals a whole other layer to the story.
Yes, he reveals that Weiss received 2 sets of canings, as he puts it. The second was a prosecution for publishing obscenities.
And this was specifically concerning McCorkle's poem Bolt to Marina, where the line, "Part of me remains, wench, bolt upright," was aggressively scrutinized by the authorities.
And this is a direct parallel to a real-world event, which we will definitely get to later, but it raises the political stakes in the novel significantly.
Chubb, of course, ever defensive and paranoid, he insists the prosecution was politically motivated.
He claims Weiss was targeted for being a Jew and because he was too successful and was cutting a swath through those clean-limbed girls at Melbourne University.
The authorities used the obscenity charge as a weapon against his modernist success. But this leads to the most important shift in the narrative, I think.
David Weiss's defense in court.
Exactly. Chubb, the cynical creator, watches as his victim becomes a hero.
He recounts how Weiss became a lion before the court. He didn't plead for forgiveness. He didn't apologize. Instead, he elegantly explained the dense cross-references to Shakespeare.
Things like Pericles or The Tempest.
Yes, and he demonstrated how the poems parodied other modernists like Eliot and Reid. And then Weiss argued that the hoax itself, the very knowledge that the work was fabricated, was integral to the mystery and the meaning of the poetry.
This is the moment, isn't it? The moment the art takes on a life completely independent of the artist's intent.
It is. The victim of the joke refuses to let the art die. He argues that the knowledge of the lie adds to the poem's meaning. For Chubb, the joke instantly stops being funny. The object he created to fail has suddenly become profound.
And the shift from literary satire to profound, unexpected tragedy, it's really only the warm-up act.
Because here is where the narrative lurches violently into Gothic horror.
Chubb tells Mix the unbelievable. The hoax poet, Bob McCorkle, became real.
And Weiss, in court, he had no idea. He thought the person who interrupted him was maybe a hired assassin sent by Chubb.
But in reality, the individual was the flesh and blood incarnation of the fictional poet, an unstable, derelict, drunk, plucked from a Salvation Army home. The lie became the man.
And he was a formidable figure. The physical description is so striking, close to 7 feet tall, with a powerful, intelligent, and rather angry face, a proud nose, a high forehead.
Doucette later describes him as having a shaved head. And this man, McCorkle, he's obsessed. He's seeking justice not for himself, but for the poetry that Chubb had mocked.
And he begins this campaign of terror with those who scorned the art. He confronts Detective Vogelsang, whose name translates to birdsing, but whose nickname, fittingly, was Basher.
The scene is horrifying.
Yeah.
In a visceral, shocking moment, McCorkle cuts a piece of the detective's scalp off with a carving knife at his home in Glen Iris.
And he claims the detective needed to be punished in the court of art. This is a clear demonstration that he's not just a madman. He is a force committed to this inverted moral code. He is the physical manifestation of the joke's deadly seriousness.
And his final devastating confrontation is with David Weiss.
Yes, Weiss shrieks at him, calling him a fake and a monster, and McCorkle, in response, trips Weiss, who hits his head on the wall and dies.
The confession to Chubb is just utterly blunt, completely devoid of remorse. I killed him, yes.
The monster has sprung to life and is now capable of killing its opponents. And that brings us to Nusette Markson,
the Australian-Russian painter who operates as the novel's ultimate political and emotional pragmatist.
She's described as a chili-potty type, a small, fiery chili. She associated with powerful, daring males and had affairs with the art critic Gordon Featherstone and, of course, with the late David Weiss.
Nusette is a master of transformation and artifice herself. She moves to Sydney and completely reinvents herself.
She sheds her Marxist wartime past like an old skin and becomes this highly successful, confident fashion photographer for Vogue.
And Chubb becomes completely fixated on her. He believes she is the key to his own emotional validation. He senses he is the most perfect man for her precisely because she could never make him her dog, unlike all her other easily manipulated lovers.
His attraction is rooted in his recognition of her strength and her self-possession.
And this fixation sets the stage for the next layer of fraud, and this is the link back to John Slater.
Yes. McCorkle, now physically real, needs legal legitimacy. He demands a birth certificate. And Nusette, believing that in the new Australia nothing was impossible, decides to just fabricate the document, and she enlists Slater's help.
She uses Slater with expert precision.
She worked him, as the book says. Slater believed he was courting this beautiful, confident woman. He remembers spending a most lovely night with her at Cremorne Point.
He had no idea he was a pawn. He was assisting in this fraud, believing he was courting love, and also easing Chubb's emotional pain by helping him secure the documents. He was completely set up and used.
The layers of deception are just staggering. A fake poet demands a fake birth certificate, facilitated by a manipulated, narcissistic poet.
But the stakes become devastatingly real when Nusette becomes pregnant in 1952.
And she approaches the pregnancy like she approaches everything else, as a public spectacle. Her customers at her restaurant, also named Nusette, they actually applaud her as she leaves for the hospital.
But the reality of actual motherhood, it doesn't align with her curated public image. Chubb, still obsessed, visits her. And while he's tidying up the remnants of a party, including plastic tumblers left by Joe Cahill, the Premier of New South Wales,
he finds them. The adoption papers for the girl child of Nusette Markson and Father Unknown.
And he is seized by this sudden, protective, white-hot fury. He realizes in Nusette's coldness, she does not want this child.
So in an impulsive, life-altering act, fueled by loathing for her detachment and his own desperation for meaning, he tells her he will adopt the child.
The irony is just monumental. Chubb, the horribly prim, self-righteous provincial academic, is utterly unprepared for fatherhood.
Completely. He was raised without siblings or cousins. Alone in Chatswood with this fretful child, he is terrified she will die.
He keeps her initially in a cardboard box.
Until his landlord, a man named Blackhall, steps in to help with baby blankets. This is Chubb's reluctant, fragile redemption, his attempt to substitute genuine human connection for the artifice of poetry.
But the monster he created returns to claim what he believes was stolen from him.
McCorkle breaks into Chubb's house in a brutal, violent confrontation, shattering the wooden doorframe. He confronts Chubb, holding the baby, and his fury is focused on the life Chubb denied him through the act of invention.
He screams, "You never gave me a child."
And the abduction is terrifying in its execution. McCorkle escapes, sprinting silently up the middle of the road with the baby's blanket streaming behind him like a piece of ghastly skin.
What a horrifying image. The life stolen, the skin of the baby's protection just ripped away.
And the helplessness of the situation is just amplified by the police reaction. Chubb, now raving and disheveled, contacts the authorities, who cannot possibly grasp the reality of a phantom made flesh.
The police sergeant simply assumes his missus left him.
He fails to recognize the gravity of the kidnapping, reducing this cosmic horror to just a routine domestic squabble.
The moment that child is stolen, Chubb's life instantly transforms. It's no longer a literary vendetta. It's a singular, obsessive quest.
For 4 years, he is too distressed by the loss of the child, who is, in a way, his only real creation, to read or write anything.
His first clue doesn't arrive until 1956. It's a letter from an Australian painter, Donald Defoe, who's in Indonesia.
And Defoe describes finding a wonderfully mad character who was reciting lines from the darkening ecliptic McCorkle's signature poem, and he was traveling with a 4-year-old girl.
The art, once again, reveals the location of the man.
So Chubb immediately contacts Nusette for help, and her response is just devastatingly cold and self-aware. She sends him a check for considerable money to fund his journey.
But she also includes this bitter note, wishing him ill. She recognizes that he is now suffering the same pain of having a child stolen and suggests there is some justice in his torment.
The architect of the literary hoax is now suffering a real-life torment that directly mirrors the pain he caused to others.
So Chubb follows this scant trail through Bali and Java, and he eventually tracks them to a lodge on Lake Toba in Sumatra.
A German botanist there named Karl Burckhardt confirms he saw them, the man and the girl. Burckhardt had actually cured the girl of very serious dysentery with rice water.
And he noted how touching it was to see McCorkle comb her hair, which suggests a genuinely paternal side to this monster.
Chubb doesn't find them, though. He only finds a scrapbook of leaves and flowers left in the lodge rafters, which is more evidence of McCorkle's voracious autodidactic mind.
Then comes this cruel twist of deception. Chubb receives a letter from Penang.
It says, "Dear Chubb, the little girl has died. She contracted a fever."
But rather than collapsing in despair, Chubb is suddenly filled with this exhilaration. He knows McCorkle is lying and that the girl is alive.
And the reason for the exhilaration, because he realizes McCorkle is now frightened of me. The pursuer has finally gained psychological dominance over the pursued.
So the hunt leads him to Penang and to the introduction of a profoundly dark figure, Mullah Chumley.
Mullah is a Tamil schoolmaster, a Sikh. He's a man of education, a chemist and physicist, but he's marked by immense trauma. His crooked eye reflects the horror he witnessed.
His suffering is crucial to understanding his capacity for violence, isn't it?
Absolutely. During the war, he witnessed atrocities, bodies, and blackened wood awash at Pantai Baru, people burned alive, and it left his left eye permanently turned sideways. He was systematically humiliated and robbed of his home and a valuable Rolex by a Japanese captain named Suzuki.
And he's been plotting revenge ever since, from a little shack, an otukata, right beside his own stolen home.
And Mullah's hobby reflects his broken morality. His house is a pharmacy of death, filled with jars of poisonous substances, catfish gall, dendeng beetle, powdered millipede. He is more than eager to teach Chubb how to kill McCorkle.
And here we have one of those darkly comical yet gruesome details that keeps the novel from becoming too heavy.
Right. Chubb is instructed to prepare a nail that's been soaked in this deadly mix, which includes urine, to ensure the poison works.
You have to pause on that absurdity. The high-minded academic poet is reduced to preparing a murder weapon using ritualistic humiliation blended with deadly toxins. It just shows the depths Chubb has sunk to in his quest for justice.
So the assassination attempt occurs at a temporary post office in Light Street. Chubb, shaking like a Brumby at the Darwin races, the most Aussie simile possible for this tense moment, he drives the poisoned nail into McCorkle's thigh.
But McCorkle, despite his weakness, fights back. He twists Chubb's arm and forces the dagger Chubb had hidden inside a rubber hose into his own buttock.
And Chubb is deported, thinking the job is done. But of course we learn later that McCorkle survives both the wound and the poison.
And this is a really great moment to transition. The pursuit of the external literary lie has pushed Chubb to literal attempted murder. But now back in KL, the pursuit of that lie forces Mix to confront her own long-standing personal artifice.
Absolutely. Because while Chubb was running from the monster he created, Mix was finally being forced to look at the monster hiding in her own family history.
She forces Slater to reveal the truth about the long-held family myth surrounding her mother's death.
The official story, the clean, tidy family lie, was that Sarah's mother drove their Armstrong civilly into the pond and drowned.
But Slater reveals the truth. The water was too shallow. It never rose above the car door handle. The horrible, visceral truth was that she committed suicide by running into the kitchen and cutting her own throat.
And Sarah, who was just a small girl, was found beside the body, covered in blood.
The entire Wode-Douglass family structure was built on maintaining that lie. And why? Because her father, Boofy, Lord Wode-Douglass, was deeply ashamed.
He was ashamed of his rather Catholic tastes, his intimacy with young men like the actor Trevor Roberts, and the disastrous public humiliation that drove his wife to such a desperate act.
So the family chose drowning over suicide because drowning was less humiliating for Boofy. It was all about protecting him.
And the key link back to Slater. Mix remembers a moment when her mother kissed him once, this messy, desperate kiss.
Slater reveals the kiss was intended to humiliate Boofy, her mother knowing her husband's secret. But Slater, recoiling in youthful shame, failed her.
Her mother's final damning words to him were, "You bastard Jacko, you total cunt."
The power of this revelation for Mix is that the fuzzy outlines of the event finally snap into focus. Her lifetime of hatred for Slater was entirely misdirected.
And even more profound, the shock of learning her father's secret nature, his love for young men, shatters her own artifice. It allows her to finally acknowledge her own 25-year secret. Her relationship with her lover, Annabelle.
The journey that was initiated by a literary lie has dismantled Mix's entire self-edited identity. It has forced her to realize that she, too, has been living a fabricated life, hiding her truth out of fear of social and familial scorn.
Now, back to the monster's creation. McCorkle, still alive, writes to Chubb from Sydney. He reveals he is dying, not of Graves' disease, which Chubb had initially dismissed as a poet's joke, referencing the poets Graves and Eliot.
But of a rare leukemia.
Yeah.
And he completely flips the script. He blames Chubb's actions for taking him from his family and forces the guilt squarely back onto the creator.
And the final piece of human truth comes when Mix and Slater, now bonded by their shared knowledge of family trauma, see a striking vision in Jalen Campbell.
Through a lighted window, they spot a beautiful young woman. And Slater confirms it's Nuset's child.
And the girl has 2 tiny freckles on her upper lip, matching Chubb's and his mother's, the definitive, heartbreaking proof that she is Chubb's daughter, his one true creation.
So Chubb tracks the dying McCorkle to Kuala Kangsar. McCorkle is just waiting to die, and he's being tended to by the devoted Mrs. Lim and his daughter Tina. He's described as a grub in a cocoon, surrounded by the journals his slaves have made for him.
And Chubb, having done his research, attempts to nurse him with the correct drug, propylthiouracil.
But McCorkle dies holding the book of poetry. The women, Mrs. Lim and Tina, they believe the hand to the demon sucked the blood from Mr. Bob, causing the leukemia.
But Chubb, the unforgiving creator, he views him differently. He believes McCorkle was a user and a thief, feeding off Tina and every child in that street to fertilize his ego.
And yet, he died clutching the poetry. It leaves this profound ambiguity about the monster's true nature. Was he a life-stealing ghoul, or was he a desperate man seeking validation for the art that he embodied?
The climax of Mix's journey culminates not in violence, at least not at first, but in literature. She finally gets to see the artifact that caused all this chaos, the McCorkle manuscript.
And it's housed in that shophouse shrine on Jalen Campbell.
The shrine itself is so symbolically important. The room is meticulously clean and it smells of pine and sandalwood, the very aroma of libraries. It's a sacred space dedicated not to a religious deity, but to an invented poet.
And the book itself is described as fat, pulpy, with a wrinkled, mottled binding, like the bark of a birch tree.
Yes, Mix notes that it looks like something that grew naturally, not something that was written.
The manuscript confirms that McCorkle was driven by a genuine, if manic, compulsion to create. It is evidence of his mania to learn the names of things, reflecting a voracious and inquiring mind.
And it's interleaved with Tina's lovely detailed drawings and the leaves and flowers that Mrs. Lim had gathered from the jungle. It's an act of co-authorship, the autodidact, the nature he observed, and the daughter he raised.
But it's the quality of the writing that truly shocks Mix. The editor who has dedicated her life to judging prose. The
She judges the poetry to be a work of genuine genius. She declares it outside the law of taste and poesy. This poet, whether he was a fake created by a joke or a real monster, had ripped up history and nailed it back together with its viscera on the outside.
That imagery, viscera on the outside, that tells you everything you need to know about the work's power. It's raw, it's unapologetic truth. She reads a line aloud. "She's burning our dewlap BB."
And in that line, she recognizes the genuine, raw passion of a man determined to master the language that had mocked him. The fake art has transcended its origins. It has become authentic.
The truth cannot be acquired without one last horrifying sacrifice.
Chubb, seeing Mick's reverence for the work, and in a final, desperate burst of ego and wild dog fury, he promises to steal the book for her. He wants to prevent it from rotting in KL.
But he also wants the validation, doesn't he? He wants proof that his joke somehow was worth the life it created and destroyed.
So the next night, Mix returns to the shop house. And this is the novel's final, brutal confrontation with reality. She finds Tina and Mrs. Lim wounded, lying in blood on the floor of the shrine.
And Mrs. Lim, through these gasping breaths, she points to the barred window and claims, "They'd kill him," meaning Chubb.
The scene Mix witnesses is ancient and horrific. Beneath the sill, she sees a pile of clothes and shoes. She reaches out and touches meat as raw as in a chow kit butcher shop.
The pile is Chubb's dismembered body, the final, brutal act of retribution.
And this scene immediately brings to Mix's mind the Greek myth of Isis gathering the mangled body of Osiris. She identifies the action as sparagmos, the ritualistic dismemberment of a victim.
The joke writer is literally torn apart by the adherents of the joke that became real.
And the question is, who committed the murder? Tina, the daughter, speaks the truth in her rough Australian accent. The mongrel la, he ran away.
The implication is clear. McCorkle's loyalists, Tina and Mrs. Lim, killed Chubb, the mongrel who tried to steal and destroy the master's legacy.
Chubb's quest for artistic truth led to his literal dismemberment, a final, visceral act of violence against the creator.
And here is where we absolutely have to tie the fictional complexity back to the historical truth, because this is the emotional and intellectual payoff of the entire novel.
It's not just a meditation, it is a meticulously constructed mirror reflecting a genuine Australian literary scandal.
The author's note confirms it. Bob McCorkle is directly based on a man named Ern Malley,
a fictitious poet created in 1944 by two anti-modernist poets, Harold Stewart and James Macaulay, and their goal was identical to Chubb's.
to hoax the modernist editor of the literary magazine Angry Penguins, a man named Max Harris.
The fictional McCorkle's verse, including the darkening ecliptic, is lifted word for word from the Ern Malley poems. The parallels are not just thematic, they are precise.
And Max Harris, the real editor, was called into court on the exact same obscenity charges faced by the fictional David Weiss.
But the profound connection, the entire reason Carey wrote this novel, is the philosophical stance taken by the victim. Just like the fictional David Weiss, the real Max Harris refused to accept that the hoax invalidated the poetry.
He argued that the intent of the author was completely irrelevant.
Harris wrote that he still believed in Ern Malley. He viewed the figure, though invented, as an embodiment of the true sorrow and pathos of our time.
He saw him as the autodidact, the colonial, the damaged beast of the Antipodes.
And this is the heart of the novel's argument. The art, created as drivel to sting a fool, was reinterpreted by the fool as genius. And then, in the novel, McCorkle, the man created from the joke, recites the verse and makes it true.
As Chubb realizes, what had been clever had now become true. The song of the autodidact, the colonial, the damaged beast of the Antipodes.
The art, once it's released, transcends its creator's malicious intent and gains an authentic, dangerous life of its own.
So this deep dive has traced the pursuit of a fake poet that resulted in real death, real crime, and the dismantling of deeply buried personal and historical truths.
From the colonial insecurity driving Mick's mother to Mick's own self-censorship.
We have seen that the invention of the personality, Bob McCorkle, became more vital, more potent, and certainly more real than Christopher Chubb, the creator who tried to destroy him.
The joke took on a life. And that life, rooted in the true sorrow of the Antipodes, demanded blood and ultimately murdered its own genesis.
McCorkle's manuscript, that final pulpy artifact, is the physical evidence of this transformation. It is the life of the art, separate from the artist's life.
The book, the life, and the legend are now inextricably linked, limb by limb, echoing Mick's recognition of the scattered, dismembered body of truth she had set out to find.
Which leaves us with a profound question for you to consider, really. If the fiction of a genius can literally bring a monster into existence,
And if poems created as a joke can ultimately be reinterpreted as a song of the autodidact, where does the responsibility of the artist end?
and where truly does the life of the art begin? The novel suggests that the moment the work is released, the artist loses all control.
And the art is then free to cause death, uncover secrets, inspire passion, and even murder its own creator.
The greatest work, perhaps, is the one that refuses to remain polite fiction, but instead becomes a vital, demanding, and dangerous truth that reshapes reality.
A provocative thought to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex, captivating, and often brutal world of Peter Carey's My Life as a Fake.
We'll see you next time.